9 minutes past 6, you're listening to Drivetime with Philip Boucher-Hayes. Irish pharmacists fear patients are at risk due to medicine shortages. For this, I'm joined now by the chair of the Irish Pharmacy Union, Darragh O'Loughlin. Darragh, good evening.
Good evening, Philip.
You've surveyed pharmacists and an overwhelming number of them are reporting shortages, and unfortunately a lot of them the same shortages.
Yes, that's right. And 97% of pharmacists, which is almost all of them, have reported that not only are they experiencing medicine shortages in their pharmacy, but that the problem has gotten worse over the last 12 months. Medicine shortages have always been an issue. That doesn't mean all the pharmacies are going to run out of all the medicines, but from time to time, some medicines are in short supply, some medicines can't be obtained. And this is something that seems to be affecting us more frequently of late. Generally, if a medicine is in short supply or a pharmacist can't secure it for a patient, they'll identify an alternative that will do the same thing or an equivalent product, speak to the doctor, the prescriber and the patient and make the substitution. But what we're seeing now is, in some cases, entire classes of medicines going out of stock, so that we haven't even got the capability of making that substitution. And that's where it gets worrying. 48% of pharmacists, which is nearly 1 in 2, are fearful that it could adversely affect patients' health outcomes.
And maybe we shouldn't give a list for fear that we cause heart failure for which there mightn't actually be a medicine to treat it, but what are those that your colleagues are most keenly worried about?
We're seeing shortages of patches, HRT patches, for menopause symptoms. We're seeing shortages of a particular medicine called digoxin, which is a long-used treatment for heart failure. There's a medicine called labetalol, which is used for hypertension or high blood pressure in pregnancy. That's been unavailable since last summer. We're seeing some antidepressants out of stock and some other blood pressure medications. We've had worrying out of stocks previously, but the medicines have come back. We've had particular medicines for epilepsy that were unavailable for a long period last year and the previous year, and they've come back into stock. In many ways, it's a global issue, but it seems to impact smaller countries much harder than large countries, because we're a small market in a global sense. Irish medicine prices, despite what many Irish people might think, are at about the average price in Europe. They're not high. If anything, they're a little bit below average. So when supplies are limited, they tend to go to the countries where prices are higher than the countries where prices are lower. Pharmacists are worried that the impact of COVID on supply chains and the potential impact of Brexit on supply chains might make this problem worse as we go into the winter.
What caused the problem in the first place? I'm sure it's multifactorial and will change from product to product, but was it stockpiling or was it social distancing in pharma facilities resulting in reduced output? Or I read somewhere recently that there's been a diversion of a considerable amount of pharma resources to speculative manufacturers of vaccines for COVID-19, which may be approved in time, and that was resulting in shortages in some countries.
You're right when you say it's multifactorial. In some cases, it's manufacturing issues. As the price of medicines goes down internationally, manufacture gets consolidated into fewer and fewer locations. So you might reach a point where there's only 1 or 2 very big factories manufacturing an active ingredient, and it could be in India or it could be in China. And if there's a difficulty or a problem with manufacture there, suddenly there's a supply issue all around the world, and the limited supply that's available goes to the countries with the biggest checkbook. We've seen, for example, that the United States government bought up the entire global supply of remdesivir for COVID-19 during the summer, and the British government has already contracted to purchase 190 million doses of a COVID-19 vaccine that hasn't completed clinical trials yet. So the bigger markets will tend to grab supply when supply is limited. The industry has an agreement with the Irish government. The HSE and the Department of Health have an agreement with the industry to cover pricing and supply of medicines. There's a problem here in that the emphasis has been on price and not on supply. And the supply element of that agreement needs to come to the fore every bit as much as the pricing element. So it's important to get medicines at a fair price, but it's even more important to have a sustainable and continuous supply.
So sorry, Darragh, do I understand you correctly? Are you saying that there might actually be drugs available, but because the HSE has been mandated to only pay X price, it can't go and purchased outside of that price?
Well, very often when a drug goes into short supply and isn't available in the Irish market, pharmacists can see that they could secure it in the UK or in France or in Belgium. Those medicines are legal to use in Ireland because they're licensed in the EU, but they come in at a price that far exceeds what the HSE is willing to pay for the medicine. If patients have a medical card, they're not going to pay higher prices for their own medicine. They expect to get it for free. And if the HSE won't pay for it, we're into a situation where the shortage then impacts on the patient.
And only the very, very wealthy would be able to afford the drugs.
Yes.
Okay. Darragh O'Loughlin, thank you very much for that. We're going